Will China invade Taiwan? Since the speaker's visit and in early August, China has conducted live fire military drills in the 6 zones that encircle Taiwan, as well as sending military vessels into the waters near Taiwan. All of this is done to demonstrate to the world, and more crucially to the U.S., that the CCP will initiate a conflict if needed, and that they will stop at nothing to effectively annex Taiwan. But are they posturing? Or is this absurd show of bravado a legitimate precursor to war? It is my belief that Taiwan is merely a pawn in this game of superpower dominance to China. China's decision to enter a conflict would have far reaching repercussions, as demonstrated by Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Costly sanctions were swiftly and ruthlessly imposed in response to Russia's aggressive actions. Russia's economy was only saved by the fact that they have oil, whereas China does not. Given that China is not Russia and that China's economy is more robust than Russia's, we can probably anticipate different effects. However, it's crucial to keep in mind that China's economy is more integrated into the world as a whole than Russia's, in particular with Western nations. Sorry. Here are some examples of that. So, exports account for almost 1/5 of China's GDP. That's about 500 billion annually, or 17%. U.S. allies make up 90% of China's top export partners. This includes nations like Japan, South Korea, Germany, Vietnam, and India. So simply put, more than 50% of Chinese exports are made to nations that are more likely than not to support the U.S. in the event of a war. China, however, stands to lose more than that. More than 500 billion in income, they stand to lose jobs should they lose their position as a major manufacturer. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because I'm acknowledging that I'm going to have to acknowledge that we benefit from our ties with China. We rely on them as exporters as much as they rely on us as importers. However, consider this: China is not the only country capable of producing our imports. They simply do it at the lowest cost. And the U.S. has an incentive to spend as little money as possible on goods. But if China were to stop, there are a lot of other nations that would happily take over the world's manufacturing responsibilities. Countries like India or Vietnam, for instance. So here's some numbers for you. About 120 million people work in manufacturing in China, and about 20% of the products that are made there are exported to the U.S. According to these numbers, if trade with China is stopped, 20% of the jobs in China will be impacted. That's 24 million individuals who might lose their job in a matter of seconds. But additionally, no event stands alone when it comes to the real economy. There are always serious peripheral implications. There are always far-reaching effects. One man's spending is another man's income, if that puts it into perspective for you. Therefore, if 20 million individuals decide to stop spending because they have no job, then other people's incomes would be affected, and which will in turn hurt the economy more. Only U.S. sanctions might have these potential results. European sanctions are also expected to be imposed on China if it invades Taiwan, possibly even a few economically robust Asian nations as well. So in essence, China's economy will suffer disastrous impacts. China has an authoritarian government. In a nation of more than 1 billion people, they cannot afford civil unrest. Their grip on power is legitimized only by the people and the government's unofficial promise of economic prosperity. They made this promise to the government after Tiananmen Square, after the massacre at Tiananmen Square. The agreement was that, as such, the people would permit governmental intrusion into their rights and privacy in exchange for the government's guaranteeing rapid economic growth, and as a result, improved living conditions for its population. And when it was working, it was working. People loved it, the government loved it, and it was great. But when the economic development started faltering and the government's authoritarianism only seemed to be escalating, the Chinese people are now questioning if the trade-off was worthwhile. Naturally. Now, compounding the situation, the COVID shutdown has only made China's economic issues worse, and middle-class people are being hit the hardest by the current economic downturn. Therefore, middle-class Chinese residents who would pose the greatest threat to the CCP's authoritarian leadership if the Chinese economy were to stagnate because of sanctions. And hundreds of billions of dollars spent on internal security may not be sufficient, because believe it or not, China spends more on internal security than they do on their military apparatus. So, literally one charismatic leader who gathers enough followers, and just like that, boom, a superpower has been erased from existence and possibly replaced with something much more sinister. I think that we can all agree that when it comes to China, the devil you know beats the devil you don't. So while screaming war might distract the citizens, starting war is not the solution. China cannot afford a war. And given this information, it is unlikely that China will invade Taiwan, in my opinion.